Okay, good evening, Cordova. It is Friday, May 8th, 2020, and we're going to have a fairly brief update to the community today because we have some special guests with us this afternoon to give us some insight into some of our preparations for our first Copper River salmon next week. So for our Cordova update, we did have one positive test this week. We had 127 individuals tested. We're awaiting results on 34 of those, and our testing capacity is 850. So the medical health team reported this morning that more tests are ordered, and we'll have those today or tomorrow. And Monday and Wednesday, we are offering free testing, actually, for anyone who has arrived to Cordova in the last 14 days. And on Monday and Wednesdays, those will be from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Alanka Community Health Center, downstairs across from the Episcopal Church. And on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 2 to 4 p.m. at Cordova Community Medical Center in the ambulance bay. And again, these are free screening tests being offered to anyone who's arrived to Cordova in the last 14 days. We do have some new rules in place. The City Council voted unanimously to approve proposed rules 2020-07. This updated emergency order was enacted this morning at 9 a.m. by City Manager Helen Howarth. And with advice from the medical team, it's intention for Cordova to match the state's Phase 1A rules regarding opening up. There were some changes as we were rolling those rules out, but what I'd like to mention in regards to these new rules is that the reopening of the businesses and the work that the incident management team has been doing to distribute packets to help businesses in the community and receive the mutual aid agreements that we've been requesting, and also responding back to questions and answers about new rules and openings. So just as a few reminders, you have to quarantine for 14 days if you are arriving from Cordova from out of state. You need to wear masks in all public places, including the harbor, the gas station, and wherever you cannot maintain 6 feet of distance. Remember, there are some health-related exemptions to those requirements. And also, remember that social distancing, 6 feet is 6 feet. Measure it out so you understand it's a little farther than some people think. Disinfect those surfaces. Stay home as much as possible. There shouldn't be any group gatherings of more than 20 people, and no non-essential travel, but you may travel for medical purposes, for subsistence purposes, and do not have to quarantine when you return to Cordova unless you have left the state of Alaska. Continue to monitor for illness and extra precautions. Take extra precautions if you're at higher risk, over the age of 65 or have underlying medical conditions. So that's our weekly update, press briefing. But I'd like to add that as we know, and as I mentioned earlier, we have our first positive test case this week. It is not an unexpected case, but neither is it cause for exceptional alarm. It was identified as part of a screening process. It was part of a plan. The individual was asymptomatic, continues to be asymptomatic. So there were no symptoms, but we have tested all the employees around that case and retested the employees who have been arriving. All of those tests have come back negative, so it's looking more and more like a very isolated and well-isolated case, and we'll get the final pieces as we get the epidemiological tracking report back from the state. So in the case of that positive test, one of our seafood processors, Ocean Beauty, was their employee, and I want to focus today on how well they responded to that case. And how well the industry in general is prepared to handle any cases that do surface through testing or through symptoms, and how ready Cordova, its fleet, and fishermen are to harvest Copper River salmon next week and to keep the community protected in the process. The first opener is next Thursday, and we have some special guests here to discuss that with us. We have Shannon Carroll from Trident Seafoods, who is their Associate Director of Public Policy. And we also have the Regional Operations Manager based here in Cordova for Trident Seafoods, Mr. Rick Isaacson. So I want to welcome you both to this evening's press briefing. And I guess I'd just like to start by asking you, Shannon and Rick, what has Trident Seafoods done to prepare for protecting your own crews, the community, and having a great fishery this year?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Coughlin. Thanks for the question, and thanks again for inviting us to participate in your daily briefing. I think Trident's been pretty upfront about this, but certainly deserves repeating. For us, the health and safety of Cordova residents, our employees, our fishermen, it's the top priority. So we've been working really hard to make sure that we have plans in place that put that priority at the forefront. Before I get into some of those details, I do just want to first, commend the city, the incident management team, and the residents of Cordova for working so hard to get the city prepared for the Copper River fishery. This has definitely been a challenging situation for everyone, but the leadership that Cordova has shown is really commendable. Obviously, the hard work's yet to be done, and I'm not suggesting that we take our foot off the gas, but I think we're in a really good position going into the season, so I just wanted to say thank you. With respect to your question, like all critical infrastructure businesses, we've submitted community and workforce protection plans to the state. Those plans were reviewed and approved by the state, and then they're also, for those that aren't aware, they're public and they're available on the city's COVID-19 website. So you can find the details of what we're going to be doing, some of our protocols for fishermen, vendors, and things like that. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of some of the highlights from those plans, but first wanted to note a couple of things. The first is these plans have been approved by the state, but we're going to continue to update and adapt these plans to make sure that they're in line with changing best practices, on-the-ground health conditions, testing technology and availability. So in that sense, they're definitely living documents. And an example of that is, as testing technology and availability has really improved over the last really like 2 weeks. We've since changed our quarantine protocol in Anchorage to now require PCR nasal swab tests before our employees leave for Cordova or any of our other facilities. So we see that as really positive, and we're very diligent about staying on top of that. And then, second, I do just want to note that we welcome feedback on our plans. For the past several weeks, we've been participating with weekly calls with the incident management team here, and then we've received feedback from Dr. Sanders and the city. But if others have feedback, please feel free to reach out to Rick or myself. So with respect to the plan itself, a few highlights of what we're doing to keep people in Cordova safe, our employees safe, and our fishermen safe. The main thing is the 14-day quarantine in Anchorage. That's a monitored quarantine with testing near the end, and then secured transport from the hotel to the airport and then to the plant in Cordova. So there's no cross-contamination in public space or anything like that. And we think that's really the best thing that we can do to prevent the virus from entering Cordova and entering our facility. At the facility, we have daily health checks, temperature screenings, the closed campus for all of our bunkhouse employees. We do have, resident employees in Cordova, and they're going to be allowed to return home, but they are going to be abiding by all the state and local mandates. And all the protocols that we have are going to be strictly enforced in a condition of employment. And then we'll have a nurse practitioner at the facility that's able to provide on-site medical care, and that nurse practitioner is going to meet with the local medical providers when they arrive and make sure that there's good lines of communication there. And then we have protocols for fishermen to minimize interactions, things like that, such as remaining on the vessel, and that's also posted on the Cordova COVID-19 website. And then we have protocols for increased hygiene, sanitization, health and safety, and then isolation of ill employees. So I also think it's important to note that, while the salmon season is about to kick off, we've been processing fish in Alaska since January, mostly in Kodiak and Agutan, and then also in our lower 48 value-added plant. So this has really been, that experience has provided us with an opportunity to work through a lot of logistics and problems that might come up. So we feel like we're well prepared, but certainly taking this very seriously. And then just, a couple other updates. I think as everybody knows, really at this point, the state released the Health Mandate 17 earlier this month, which provides guidance for independent catcher vessels. And we've been very supportive of that mandate. I think it provides a lot of clarity and uniformity for a pretty diverse fleet. And then we've provided quite a bit of outreach to our fleet just in terms of what's required of the mandate, things to think about or purchase before heading out for salmon season. And then we've taken a lot of steps to figure out how we can help make sure that the fleet meets those requirements. And then last, we have, I've communicated this with you, Mayor Copeland, but we've been advocating at the state level for additional in-region infrastructure, assessment of medical support capacity, prioritization of test kits, and funding for monitoring and compliance tools. So it seems like, based on the regional call this week that representatives from the state were on, that the state's been really proactive in this regard recently, and so really appreciate the work from DHHS and Unified Command. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Rick for some updates on staffing and operations. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Mayor Clay Copeland. Like Shannon said, nurse practitioner, she is going to be in on the 11th of this month. The clinic just got finished up. It's going to have 6 quarantine rooms, plus an office and an exam room and a waiting room. Right now, we have 40 people in quarantine in Anchorage. They're due to be finished up on the 18th. Like Shannon said, they will be tested prior to the ending of the quarantine. And from there, we're going to be on secured buses going to the airport. They will go to the private side on chartered planes that are all cleaned and ready to go, and then sent to Cordova, where they'll not go through the airport, but go around at the private gate. The next group we have will be coming in on June 2nd with approximately 36 people. Then on June 5th, we have another group coming in, about 80. And we'll have more people coming in the next 2 weeks after that. Those are still working on those issues. We have just got our fencing in from Anchorage, or getting offloaded on the barge, so be able to completely close off the south plant. And then on the north plant, with the city's approval to close off Jimport Avenue, we'll be running across from our bunkhouse to our warehouse, and then between our warehouse and the Quonset hut between Ocean Beauty, and then kind of across the street, corner of LFS and the warehouse. And we'll have security there, making sure that all residents of both the north and south stay on the property, except for a few runners. And then anybody that needs to go in between the north and the south to work will be transported by vans and buses. So, and now we're just getting really excited to start to see the first salmon of the summer, or the spring here next week on the 14th.
Well, that's great, Rick. Really appreciate all the work that Trident Seafoods has been doing for weeks, really, and again, your transparency and openness, and sharing your early plans, encouraging us to share them with the whole community, welcoming feedback and input to identify areas where those might be strengthened, or where there are elements that might not be as essential, and have just really appreciated the partnership we've had with Trident Seafoods, and easily one of the most challenging preparations for a salmon season. But as you mentioned, it's almost upon us. So how do you feel like the season is shaping up?
Well, I think there's definitely going to be some challenges with the season, early season with the Copper River, with most of the restaurants closed down. But people are excited. Weather's great in Seattle right now. It's about 80 degrees. And so I think people are ready to go to their Costco's and their QFC's and the fish markets, which are open, and get some of this fish. So Alaska Airlines doing their first fish again this year. We're going to be bringing donating the first king, and then some sockeye, and one of the local chefs is going to take that fish and cook it up on Friday night for first responder dinners up in, I'm not sure, but I think it's the Swedish Ballard Hospital. So we're pretty excited about that partnership. That's also with Ocean Beauty and Copper River Seafoods.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was talking to one of our local doctors, and he's eating salmon every day. He says the amino acids, the salmon is really one of the healthy nutritional foods that a lot of nutritionists are recommending people take during the virus to help your own immune system. So that sounds like a lot of fun, and it's great to be thinking of our first responders at this time. And I know you have, as you've put your plans together, and really appreciate the medical resources you're bringing to the community this year as well to get those early detections that not only help with the spread, but really assist the medical team in treating people before the symptoms, can overwhelm some of our resources for your workers and Fleet's health and also for the community. So thanks again. Just really appreciate you being on this afternoon and helping to update the community on some of the great plans we have in place, and looking forward to a great first week. Any final comments?
Just thank you to the city and everybody that's been working so hard to have great plans in place to make sure that we can have a successful season and keep everybody in Cordova and our employees and our fishermen safe and healthy.
Okay, well, thank you much. And
thanks for having us on, Clay.
You betcha. Thank you, Shannon. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you.
Thank you.
All right, that's what we have for this evening. Have a great weekend, Cordova.